my channel. It's HMAR Mobile Tech, and today I'm going to be working on a 2001 Mercury Grand Marquis with a 4.6 liter. And right now I've got my little quick and dirty give me my answer code reader hooked up right now, and I just want to see why the check engine light is on, which is the reason why the customer brought it to me. And so I'm just gonna see what the codes are. And I got a P0125, P0125, and the definition of this fault code is that it's insufficient coolant temperature sensor for closed loop fuel control. So what this is saying is that in order for the computer to properly process fuel trim, long-term and short-term fuel trim, which is what fuel control is, to achieve closed loop, we need to have the engine coolant temperature sensor hot enough for this to be achieved. So just doing a little bit of basic research on this fault code, there could be a couple of different things to cause this. And I don't know the specifications that are, very technical as to the fault code criteria, but I would take an educated guess that if it just drops below a few degrees below what it should be while it's at full operating temperature, or somewhere if the computer is measuring how long the engine is running and it knows the ambient temperature, the outside temperature, and it's taking too long for the engine to heat up, this could mean that the thermostat is maybe just staying open too much. And so it's insufficient coolant temperature. Insufficient means it is not enough. So whether it's 5 degrees or 10 degrees or just a couple of degrees, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to go ahead, knowing the age of the car, knowing the miles on it, knowing the customer has not done any work to it in many, many years. It needs a thermostat anyway. The coolant temperature sensor appears to be the original one from 2001. I'm going to put a new coolant temperature sensor in, and I'm going to put a new thermostat and new coolant, all from Ford. So I'm not going to mess around. I want to get it done. I want it done right, and I don't want the customer to worry, and I don't want this car to be a comeback. Get yourself a stubby 3/8 drive or whatever, or a 1/4 inch drive with an adapter, and get your 19mm socket. And that's going to be for down here. There's going to be the petcock down there, and it's kind of like an off-white color down there. It's a hex 19mm, and get a catch pen underneath of it. And I've already got a catch pen underneath, and so I'm going to drain the whole radiator, take the cap off. And if all you're doing is the thermostat, then you don't need to take out the coolant temperature sensor, which I've already done. And it's a 19mm deep socket. I used a 1/2 inch to take that out with a deep 19mm 6-point socket. So drain the radiator out, and then in the next clip I'll show you what the next procedure is. Get started removing the thermostat housing bolts. They're two 10mm bolts, so you just get a deep socket or a short 10mm socket with an extension on it and a 3/8 drive ratchet, and get that taken out. One thing I wanted to mention is that you might want to go a little bit light on the torque. The specifications that I found on ALLDATA when I looked up this vehicle and the job was that the thermostat housing bolts were 18 foot-pounds. I went a little bit light and I went to about 15 to 16 foot-pounds. And then the coolant temperature sensor I put to about 144 inch-pounds, which is 12 foot-pounds. So you want to go kind of light on that. This is a plastic intake manifold with brass inserts. As you can tell down there, it's a brass insert, and I would imagine not for the thermostat housing bolts. I think those just go into the bottom housing. They could be brass inserts, they could be aluminum inserts, I'm not 100% sure. And so yeah, just take it easy on that. It's an old intake manifold and you want to be careful not to torque too much, and you're not going to leak if you go a little bit light on the torque, so you should be good. And then get your ratchet that you use to take out the loosen up the petcock, the drain valve of the radiator, and go ahead and snug it back up. Be very, very, very gentle. It's plastic, so don't go too tight. Just turn it until you feel it stop, and maybe go this much more. That's it, and that should be more than enough. You can always go back and do another 1/10 of a turn or something if you see it's leaking later, but once you break it, you're screwed, so don't break it. Then get your spill-free funnel. I like to use the OEM Tools 87009 and get that in there. And if you don't have one, you can just use a regular funnel. And mix your coolant 50-50. And I just like to use this kind here from Walmart. Concentrated, so just make sure you mix it with good, clean, distilled water. Now I know this cooling system doesn't have any leaks, but I'm also going to check just for good measure. I'm going to fill up the cooling system, and then I'm going to do a pressure test at approximately, I like to go a couple of PSI below the cap. I don't know the spec, but usually around 13, 14 PSI should be good for most systems, and that's usually what I always do. And pressure test it and make sure we're good, no leaks. And before you fill up the radiator, make sure you put the radiator hose back on and you tightened up the petcock drain valve of the radiator. Whatever you took off that's in the cooling system that could cause a leak, put that back on and put it all back together right. So get my adapter on. Fits on the threaded part of this expansion tank. And this kit that I'm using is a Mighty Vac. It's a Mighty Vac cooling system test kit, MV4560. So you push the hose on all the way first, and then get your little gray nut here, little plastic nut to go on here to pinch it down real good. And then you just start pumping it up, and as you can see here, the pressure should start to go up here. On this particular tester, you just keep going till you'll see the little blue arrow, and that's 14 psi. I'm at the blue arrow, so I'm at 14 psi. Well, this part of the test here is you're just going to wait about 2 to 4 minutes and just verify that you're somewhere within the ballpark of where you left it. What you do is you want to look around now at the heater core hoses back there where they go into the engine. You want to check your coolant temperature sensor if you replaced it, make sure there's nothing leaking. And then you want to check over here at your thermostat, make sure everything's good. And then I always like to go down to the bottom of the car and check to see if there's anything visually coming out. You get the idea. It's been about 3 minutes, and the needle has not moved from the position of that blue arrow, 14 psi. So this system's good. Integrity wise, it holds pressure. And now what you need to do is put the radiator cap back on and double check the level of the coolant. Let the engine run for about 10 minutes and try to get the thermostat to open. Make sure the fans work. And if you have to rev the engine a little bit, make sure you chock the wheels and leave it in park. And you can rev the engine about 2,500 RPMs in park and set the e-brake and wait till the engine warms up enough till the thermostat starts to open. And then make sure that everything looks good, no leaks, engine doesn't overheat. You want to be checking to make sure the engine doesn't overheat during this whole process. If it does, immediately turn the engine off and inspect. Refill the coolant reservoir again and then double check. And basically it's just turning off the engine and letting it cool for a couple minutes, and then the pressure will normalize and then it will gulp in some more air, and then you should go and start it back up again and it should be normal operating temperature. So if you got to do that a couple times, it's perfectly normal. And then just make sure it's good, and then go when you're sure it's good, go road test it. Make sure everything's good, it doesn't overheat. The main thing is you want to be doing this work before you take it out on a road test so that you don't overheat while you're on the road test. You did a good job. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.